in her practice and what she learned from it.
Right. I thank Saiba and Aditya for this invitation, and I hope all of us, including me, can learn from my mistakes. Actually, I would like to thank for them for this idea because it forced me to go back and look at the surgeries that I've been doing for the past 2, 3 years, and actually had to sit and look through all the mistakes, and it was quite painful, but I'm sure useful experience. So my topic for today is the cataract perspective in 3 mistakes of my life, and I have no financial interests. So after I was very depressed by seeing all the stupid mistakes that I have made, I saw this and forget the mistake, remember the lesson. I think that that's what all of us need to do because we are not perfect. We are not the machines that we work with, and so we will make mistakes. However, for the audience, learn from the mistakes of others. You can never live long enough to make them all yourself. So please learn from all my mistakes. And so basically, I'm going to compress my cataract journey into 3 lessons. Someone told me once that if you have an intact capsular excess, then half your job is done. But I feel that capsular excess, even though it's one of the most important parts of cataract surgery, is also it's a part of a domino effect. If one thing goes right, you are able to do the next thing a little bit easier and the next thing even a bit easier. The same thing applies when things go wrong. So my 3 lessons are going to be related to Rexis, nucleus management, and IOL implantation. So the Rexis part, I have 3 videos, and this is where there was a problem with the initiation of the Rexis. I will talk about why the Rexis was not initiated as smoothly as could be. So as you have noticed, the chord length of your Rexis, in the sense that if you consider the Rexis as a circle, then the radius of that circle is the first cut that you make. So if it's too small, really you are relaxing the elastic fibers of the capsule, but you're not relaxing them enough for yourself to be able to create a flap. And the radial cut that you give is probably the most important part of initiating a Rexis. So this was maybe too small a cut, and we were not really able to initiate a Rexis as easily as we should have been. The next is about a little bit about the completion. This Rexis looks okay, a little bit on the smaller side, but now that I've reached nearly the end of it, the last 1 clock hour seems to be the most difficult part and simply not moving ahead. So why is this happening is what I was wondering, and then I completed it, all right, it's okay, but why the difficulty? The importance is not in the major problems, because major problems are obvious. Here you can see the initiation itself, there's a lot of viscoelastic that was leaking out of the side port wound, and that is because you're pressing on the wound and not on your cystitome as you should. There is a progressive shallowing of the AC, and you're really not having enough flat surface for you to complete your axis, and the fulcrum, which is the focus of your movement, is actually the wound and not the tip of your cystitome, which is where it should be. And therefore the completion problems that I faced in this situation. So sorry. Yeah, so when you're doing Rexis in a diseased eye, probably this was a uveitic eye, and I did not really anticipate the fact that the capsule was going to be brittle. It was not going to behave like a usual capsule. The only good thing I did was that I stained the capsule, so at least I was really able to see where I was going and what I was doing with it. I was also able to see the fact that I have broken the capsule a bit, and thankfully the distal end of the capsular axis was also at least accessible from this end till now. Now that I've reached this area, I realize that I need to take some action and probably reassess. Got out of the eye and put in some viscoelastic, flattened the capsular axis, took in the cystitome from the other hand. Probably sometimes you need to get creative with your surgeries, because the eye leaves you no option, and your own mistakes kind of land you up in a ditch. So I was looking for the flap and I was not able to find a flap. I was then wondering what to do, and I actually made another cut. I'm sorry, it's a little slow, I guess. Yeah, and I'm finally able to get the cut and complete the rexis from that end. But as ophthalmologists, we sometimes have to be ambidextrous and probably be able to do our rexis with both hands. There are many people we have seen in training who have done this and they do this regularly. But this is something that I found useful in this case. But having said that, what could I have done differently? The lessons I've learned from Rexis are that you need to understand that it is not just force. It is force in a particular direction. So you need to understand the fact that it's a vectors and not just force. And we need to think in 3D. It's not a two-dimensional thing happening on a piece of paper. You are actually within a compartment which is filled with either viscoelastic or fluid, and there should be equal pressure from above and below the capsule in order for you to behave, in order for you to do stuff in a two-dimensional fashion, predictable fashion. So in a diseased eye, probably I could have gone with a high viscosity OVD. I'm sure the seniors in the audience will be able to tell me much more. But we sometimes need to be cautiously creative. Start with a smaller rexis because it is more likely to spiral out of control. And if you have an intact rexis, even though small, probably you can get away with a uneventful cataract surgery in these cases. So next up is a soft cataract, which I have always found very difficult to deal with, especially because we are divide and conquer surgeons. I'm sure even the chop surgeons find it difficult. Uh, I had a problem with the depth of my trenching from the beginning of my training. All my trainers have always told me, don't be scared, trench as deep as you should, and trench as deep as you should in the center, and then only you will be able to get a crack in the first go. Here, as you can see, I am deepening the trenches, but I also realize now, after having seen this video a couple of times, that the direction of my second instrument is wrong. If the long axis of the second instrument is not in keeping with the groove that I have made, I will not be able to get a decent crack in the first go. As you can see, there's a lot of zonular stress that is happening, and this can probably cause problems in case there is a compromised zonular support. This is another case where similar things happen. I'm trying to do this repeatedly with both my instruments in completely non-parallel fashion, and sometimes I get away with it and sometimes I'm struggling. Also, the depth at which I keep my instrument is essential. Even if you have a deep trench but you are putting force superficially, you're not going to be able to actually get the crack. Having said that, if you have a very wide trench and you don't have enough foot control, foot pedal control, then this kind of a thing will happen where you're not able to get the pieces out. You're actually eating them up inside the bag and actually creating a crater for yourself, which you will have a problem dealing with later. So I find that some of the more non-dramatic problems that we face in cataract surgery are more troublesome than the dramatic ones and obvious ones like PCR, etc. Because those we are prepared for. These are the ones which trouble us more. So zonular stress is something that we inadvertently do create, and it is essential to understand the vectors. It is essential to understand that there is a depth thing here and you have to work in 3D. The next is IOL implantation. I feel as part of our training, it's been an ignored part. Foldable IOLs is a different ball game. All of us, because of various economic and other reasons, have been trained in putting a rigid IOL inside the bag. And foldable IOLs, of course, are easier and therefore ignored. So, but it needs different skills for these and rigid IOLs separately. Hydrophilic and hydrophobic lens materials should be understood properly, and there is a difference between methods of oil injection. All these problems we have faced. This is a simple thing that actually happened a few days back, and this was a completely uneventful surgery, and I was like in a bit of a hurry. I think I'm always in a hurry, so a bit of a hurry to go, and I was thinking, oh good, the IOL is gone inside, chalo chalo, let's leave. And this happened. So this thing flipped inside and I was like, oh, should I leave it just like that or what should I do? And I could see my father's face. So I said, no, I have to keep it. I have to do it well. So I just went in with two instruments and flipped it inside. the bag, but it's important that you have enough viscoelastic in the bag so that when you do this, you don't create any problems. However, foldable IOLs are going to be less problematic than rigid ones, but then this kind of a problem can also happen more in foldable IOLs. So I would like to acknowledge all the people who helped me with this presentation, and for Saiba to allow me to present my mistakes. IIOC for the opportunity. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Devyani. Any questions for her?
I think Devyani is very heartening to know that we are on the same page with mistakes.
Yeah, I have a question though. What,
Yeah.
according to you, do you feel is the most difficult step in for a beginner at least to start foldable IOLs? What I feel like what I struggle the most with is loading of the IOL.
Yeah, I agree.
Usually, what I go wrong with and end up breaking haptics and wasting a lot
I
of
have
money.
very bad breaking haptic videos, but yeah, but really bad ones. But I did not have enough time to include them all. I agree. Loading of the IOL. Also, sometimes as a beginner, you are using Indian IOLs, and you're using IOLs which may not be as good as probably the ones that are more premium IOLs, I would say, because sometimes I've realized that the injector system that they have, that is not calibrated. It's not the IOL. The injectors sometimes is very easy to push them in, sometimes they just don't go in. So one thing that I've felt always that is helpful is to actually check under the microscope that your trailing and the leading haptic are actually moving away from the plunger. If they are not, you would probably like to withdraw a bit and allow a bit of air bubble or visco to come in between the two and then again inject. That has helped me avoid these trailing haptic problems, and I think Indian IOLs have more of those than the
One more
ones.
suggestion, having a backup IOL. I think that's also...
Yeah, always. We always have a rigid IOL standby if the junior surgeons are
And
operating.
one thing
Always.
you were saying about where to look at, so that is very important because half the time what we do is we actually look at the tip to see
Correct.
whether the IOL is
Yeah,
coming, which you're
agree.
not supposed to.
Yeah.
You should see where it starts.
Yeah.
When an IOL starts moving perfectly, it will come out perfectly. If there is a
Exactly.
problem in where it starts,
Yeah.
you're going to have
And
some
sometimes after I've started watching the trailing haptic, sometimes I've been able to avoid problems by just withdrawing a little, because you actually see that the trailing haptic is coming in between your plunger and the wall of the injector, and sometimes if you just withdraw, it simply goes back to its place. So that was my... Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Correct.
Difficult to chop them.
Yeah,
Once you
agreed.
get two
Absolutely.
good cracks, you've got enough material to even hold.
Hold. Yes.
Good vacuum, and then you can just get into and just with no power at all, only with vacuum you'll be able
Yeah,
to-
completely agree. So that's what I've started doing as well. A thin, long and deep trench really helps
I
you
would
divide
also
it.
request Dr. Dina and Dr. Gadze to give us 2 points.
Thank you, ma'am. Mike, please.
I think one thing
Yeah.
you said about capsular Rexes
Yeah.
was very beautiful was it is actually should be a 3D procedure.
Yeah.
The moment you make it a 2D procedure, you're pulling on the Rexes,
Yeah.
which is definitely a problem because how much of force you're applying on the sclera, how much of regress of the viscoelastic. It should be a lifting movement, and try with the Rexes forceps.
Yes.
You will not
Yeah,
fail.
yeah, exactly
Okay?
what I
And
realized after.
the second thing about your soft cataracts, always hydrodelineate your center core. The moment you get the center core, then you really don't need to do a lot of this divide and conquer and all. You can always flip it. Once you flip the center part, you can go into your epinucleus mode, which is very safe setting to take the rest of the nucleus. So I think these 2 things are very important, and they'll make your life very, very simple. And loading of the IOL, always load your IOL under the microscope. Always do that. You won't have a problem. And then push it slightly. See that especially the trailing haptic is being shifted, because most of the problems happen when the trailing haptic is overriding the plunger. And that's when it gets caught and doesn't move. It's not the plunger the problem, it's the loading the problem. So be careful.